It's easy to believe that in order to matter, you have to be everywhere, every social post, every conversation, every meeting. But that strategy spreads you thin. It makes your presence diluted, predictable. And influence, true influence, requires density, not volume. It's not about how often people see you. It's about how deeply they feel you when you're there. And when you're constantly available, constantly explaining, constantly proving, you rob yourself of that impact. The silence that could have spoken for you gets drowned in noise you never needed to make. Carl Jung once said, "The more compulsive a person is in impressing others, the less he is impressed with himself." That's the trap many fall into, always showing up, always needing to be visible, always broadcasting. But the ones who command a room without saying a word, they've learned to let absence speak. They've learned that influence isn't about chasing admiration. It's about creating space for others to recognize your value without you having to sell it. They don't need to compete for attention because they've created an energy that attention naturally follows. There's a discipline in withdrawal, in holding back, in not reacting to every provocation or chasing every opportunity for visibility, because what you withhold becomes powerful. People wonder what you're thinking, they anticipate your input, they respect your timing. You stop being predictable, and that unpredictability makes you magnetic. You become the person who doesn't always speak, but when you do, people listen because you've trained them to expect substance, not noise, intention, not filler. And that difference sets you apart in a world that over-explains and underthinks. You also begin to see how much of your energy was being spent trying to be seen by people who were never really looking. How many times you showed up out of fear of being forgotten. How often you gave your presence away like it had no cost. But when you reclaim that power, when you start showing up on your terms, not out of insecurity, you realize something. People start chasing the version of you that no longer chases them. You're not just noticed, you're remembered. Not because you shouted, but because your silence said something they couldn't ignore. Withdrawing attention also creates room for reflection. When you're not constantly performing, you can observe, you can listen, you can learn. You begin to move with precision instead of impulse. Your decisions become more deliberate, your actions more meaningful, and your words, when you finally choose to use them, cut deeper, land harder, and linger longer. That's the kind of presence that sticks. The kind people talk about even when you're not around because you've become more than a person in the room. You've become a standard, a benchmark, a reference point for presence with purpose. And this doesn't mean you isolate yourself. It means you refine your timing. You learn that being everywhere isn't the same as being effective. That attention is not the prize. It's the byproduct of mastery. You don't need to insert yourself into every discussion. You don't need to be the center of every plan. You just need to move with such clarity, such self-respect, that when you do choose to engage, it carries weight. And when you don't, it still carries meaning, because even your absence has become part of your influence. The shift is internal. First, you stop measuring your worth by how many people see you. You stop craving applause. You start building silence into your strength, distance into your strategy. And when you finally release that need to be constantly validated, you become something rare, something people can't quite define. That mystery, that quiet confidence is what makes them lean in. Because we don't chase what's always in front of us. We chase what holds itself just out of reach. What requires effort to understand what demands our attention without asking for it. You realize that presence is not a performance, it's an offering. One that becomes more powerful when it's not handed out freely, but reserved for moments that matter. And the people who truly see you, who truly value you, won't need you to be everywhere to feel your influence. They'll feel it in the silence, in the choices you make, in the spaces you no longer fill with noise. Influence, after all, isn't about being loud. It's about being unmistakable. And when your energy carries that kind of weight, you don't have to force people to notice. They just do. Eventually, people stop questioning your quiet. They stop mistaking your absence for weakness. They start seeing it for what it is: a deliberate withdrawal, a conscious move, a decision rooted in clarity, not avoidance. Because power isn't proven by how often you speak. It's proven by how much your silence says, by how people respond when you enter the room, and what they feel when you leave it. And the ones who understand this, who practice it, become impossible to ignore, not because they chase the spotlight, but because they outgrow the need for it. So while the world continues to scramble for attention, posting, performing, shouting, you remain still, intentional, unbothered. You build a presence that doesn't shout for recognition, but commands it through restraint. You don't force your value onto anyone. You allow them to come to it on their own. And when they do, it's not because you beg to be seen. It's because your absence was loud enough to remind them what your presence felt like. And that is the kind of influence that lasts. In a time when everyone's fighting to be noticed, the ones who choose to be rare become unforgettable. Because what's scarce isn't just desired, it's remembered. Not for how often it showed up, but for how it made people feel when it did. Power is often misunderstood. People say it corrupts, that the moment someone rises, they turn cold or ruthless or self-absorbed. But the truth is usually more uncomfortable than that. Power doesn't create something new inside of you. It just turns up the volume on what's already there. It strips away the mask of politeness, the illusion of humility, the performance of virtue. It removes the need to pretend. And suddenly the parts of you that were once buried beneath fear or self-doubt begin to surface. Power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. That's why those who chase power without ever looking inward tend to fall apart the moment they get it. Because what they've been hiding from in the quiet, those unresolved insecurities, the lack of self-discipline, the hunger for validation doesn't disappear with success. It grows teeth, it spreads, and it begins to spill into every decision they make. The ones who become dangerous aren't the ones who hold power. They're the ones who never learned how to hold themselves. Because power in the hands of the ungoverned becomes a mirror turned outward, and it reflects their chaos onto the world. But those who've done the inner work know better. They understand that the climb isn't about status or applause, it's a test. The higher you go, the more eyes are on you. The more your choices echo, the more your silence speaks. That's why the truly powerful disappear into themselves before they rise. Not to isolate, but to understand, to clean the lens through which they see the world, to strengthen the hands that will eventually carry more weight. Because if the foundation isn't strong, no height is safe. Self-awareness is not a luxury at the top. It's a necessity. Without it, power becomes noise, influence becomes manipulation, and leadership becomes theatre. But when you've faced your own shadows, when you've sat in your silence and asked yourself the hard questions, power doesn't intoxicate you. It humbles you because you start to see how fragile it all really is. How easy it is to lose yourself in praise. How tempting it is to believe you're above correction. And how vital it is to keep returning to yourself for clarity. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's the hidden trap of power. Without introspection, you start believing your impulses are wisdom. You confuse fear with instinct. You justify pride as principle. And before long, the very thing you once sought to master ends up mastering you. But when you bring your unconscious patterns into the light, when you catch yourself before ego takes the wheel, you begin to steer with purpose instead of impulse. Discipline becomes the quiet thread running through everything you do. Not the discipline that shows off, but the kind that says no when no one's watching. The kind that builds when applause is absent. The kind that stays rooted when opportunities to exploit, impress, or dominate present themselves like easy victories. It's this type of inner restraint that separates real strength from loud ambition, because power handed to someone without that restraint is like placing fire in the hands of a child. It burns more than it builds. And so, the powerful retreat not as a sign of weakness, but as a preparation for presence. They create space to think clearly, to reconnect with principle, to remember why they started. They don't need to be seen to feel significant. They don't need to control others to feel in control because they've learned that the hardest person to lead is the one in the mirror. And once they've done that, leading others becomes a responsibility, not a performance, a sacred weight, not a spotlight. The true cost of power is that you can no longer hide. The world looks to you not for perfection, but for clarity. And if your soul is cluttered, your leadership will be too. That's why arrogance isn't a byproduct of power. It's the echo of an unexamined self. And humility, contrary to what many believe, doesn't mean shrinking. It means understanding the gravity of your role and still choosing to move with care.